Are moving closer to passing new rules to regulate artificial intelligence tools, including ChatGPT. This week, they voted for a tougher draft legislation to block this AI Act. It could be the world's first comprehensive legislation to regulate this new technology, including rules over facial recognition and biometric surveillance. As part of the proposal, AI tools will be classified according to their perceived level of risk, from low to unacceptable. Sarah Chandler is a senior policy advisor at European Digital Rights, and she joins me now from Belgrade. Thanks so much for being here with us. And it's interesting to get a look at what Europe is doing, because it could influence what's happening here in the U.S. So just looking at the list of measures that they're taking, what are the two of the most important ones, do you think? I mean, certainly I highlighted one of them, banning using biometric ID in public. So what else caught your eye?
Yeah, definitely. So also what we have to look at in terms of the EU legislation is there's a whole list of prohibited technologies about what is considered unacceptable. In addition to facial recognition, we've also seen predictive policing banned. So the idea that AI systems can predict where or by whom crime will happen before it's actually happened, that is banned under the new EU AI Act and will continue to be debated. Another thing that is a really big win for civil society is increased transparency and accountability measures on high-risk technology. Now, what that means is that if a government or if a company is seeking to deploy a system classified as high risk, for example, AI systems used to make decisions about welfare or access to jobs, for example, the deployer of that system, the company or the government using that system will have to declare public information about using that system, and also show that how it would mitigate the potential human rights impacts.
Yeah, and predictive policing that you mentioned there is something that's been a hot button topic here in the U.S., and it's certainly being used extensively in some cities. So what are two of the most important misses here, do you think? What wasn't included that you think should have been?
Definitely. So we've been looking into the uses of AI at the border, particularly trying to predict where illegal migration is happening, and also discriminatory risk profiles of migrants. We think that AI use in these contexts should be prohibited as well, and that's particularly crucial for preserving the right to asylum and general rights of migrants, and that was not included in the list of prohibitions.
Yeah,
Another flaw is the need for more accessibility requirements for people with disabilities. Many AI systems are increasingly used, and yet developers have not always taken the right steps to ensure that everybody can use these systems, including people with disabilities.
And what about ChatGPT? I mean, that's certainly something that's been in the headlines a lot here, raised a lot of eyebrows as people sort of come to terms with their capabilities. How would chatbots be regulated?
So chatbots are regulated in two particular ways. Number one, the draft legislation would require you to be informed if you're interacting with a chatbot, which is already an important measure against disinformation or people being tricked into thinking that they are speaking to a human. So that's one step. But also the legislation seeks to try to address the underlying issues with big, large language models underlying ChatGPT. Now there are massive environmental impacts when you develop those systems, but also there are labor exploitation issues. What this legislation seeks to do is require big companies like OpenAI or like Google, for example, who are developing those systems to disclose more information exactly about the level of compute needed, which is a massive issue. And that's a bit more of an underlying issue that is often ignored in the conversation about ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's not something I've ever thought about in all of the implications here. Now, in terms of the companies that if they were to break the rules, it seems as though the punishment would be more than just a slap on the wrist, right?
Definitely. So for some of the requirements in the legislation, there is a fine that could actually potentially go up into the millions. So there's potential real accountability that is at stake here, but that depends on how the final piece of legislation is negotiated, which will probably happen at the end of this year.
Yeah. Now, before we go, I want to ask you this, because this is vital here for the U.S. I mean, the EU isn't a huge developer of AI technology, but certainly what happens in Europe often gets passed down to the U.S., where things like privacy issues online and so on. What's happened in Europe has affected what's happened here in America and in Canada elsewhere. So how do you think that what is happening in Europe might trickle down, and we might see some of that regulation be replicated elsewhere?
Yeah, definitely. We call it the Brussels effect. So legislation passed in the EU definitely gets passed on to across the world. I think the main message for the US is really to look toward the EU and in terms of the human rights centered approach that the European Parliament is trying to take. It's looking at issues like racial discrimination, it's looking at issues like migrants' rights, and all of these things are often underlooked in the question about technology development. I think that's a really big learning and message I would take to US regulators. If they are looking to look at regulating technology, it's not just all about the profit that can be made, it's about the people too.
Excellent point. We'll have to leave it there, but really appreciate getting your insights on this. Sarah Chander, Senior Policy Advisor at European Digital Rights. Appreciate it.
I'm a doctor, and my passion is to alleviate arthritis pain using nothing